program is brought to you compliments ACB Grenada Bank, Simply Smarter Banking, and Gittins Pharmacare, the pharmacy that cares. Gittins Pharmacare, the pharmacy that cares. Halifax Street, St. George's. Affordable access to care, a wide range of prescription drugs, medical supplies, health and beauty items, diabetic testing supplies, immune system support products, vitamins, supplements, and lots more. Visit us today or call 440-2165. Ask about or call in prescriptions, discounted items, and special delivery requests. Gittins Pharmacare. Care, convenience, expertise. We've got it all.
Greetings and welcome to Interesting Grenadians. This evening we feature historian Dr. Curtis Jacobs. He's a Trinidadian Grenadian, but he's very knowledgeable about two very fascinating Grenadians, Julia Fedor and S.A. Francis. Curtis, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, you are, as far as I understand, one of the world's most knowledgeable people on Julia Fedor. How did that come about?
I came about that as a strange set of events and circumstances. It really began in 1992. Mm-hmm. I was at an Assembly of Caribbean Peoples preparatory meeting at OWTU's All-Fields Workers Trade Union, Trinidad and Tobago, in San Fernando, where I met George Louison.
Okay.
At the time, I was writing a book on Elton George Griffith, another Grenadian, mm-hmm. who went to Trinidad in 1941 and became the leader of the public campaign to repeal the Shouters Prohibition Ordinance, which culminated on March 30th, 1951, which is a public holiday in Trinidad and Tobago today, Shouter Baptist Liberation Day. Mm-hmm. And I was asking George about some place names and so on. And George said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I am working on this Grenadian who went to Trinidad." He says, "Oh, we're looking for someone," he never identified we, "to write a popular history of Fedor's rebellion." And I said, "Who?" He says, "Fedor." And he's in trying to explain Fedor, who Fedor was to me. I remembered that Paul Keynes Douglas had this piece called Fedor's Flute, mm-hmm. which was played in Trinidad and mm-hmm. has a book and so on. And from that day in November of 1992 to the present, I have been digging up on Fedor and Fedor's rebellion.
Mm-hmm. But today is March 3rd. March 3rd. Isn't that the anniversary of the Fedor Rebellion?
Yes. Fedor's rebellion began on or about midnight mm-hmm. on March the 2nd to the 3rd, 1795. Mm-hmm. It began with simultaneous attacks on what is now called Grenville mm-hmm. and Guave. Mm-hmm. By this time in 1795, Governor Ninian Hulme would have been captured by Julian Fedor's brother in the Bay of Guave, mm-hmm. and he would have been on the way to be taken up to Belvedere, which was Julian Fedor's residence and the headquarters of the abortive revolution by then. Mm-hmm. About this time that we are speaking now, in 1795. Mm-hmm. So Fedor's rebellion is really, in some ways, a difficult event to categorize. It is difficult because, one, it was a rebellion aimed at a social transformation of the society. Mm-hmm. It was meant to create a revolution. Basically it was an anti-slavery, anti-colonial rebellion. Mm-hmm. It's a rebellion because it didn't succeed. Right. If it had succeeded, it would have been a revolution. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, the involvement, Fedor had the support of the revolutionary chieftain in the Eastern Caribbean, whose name was Victor Hughes. So Fédon's Rebellion is part of the French Revolutionary War, which began from 1792 until about 1803 with the Treaty of Amiens, right? And then, so it was part of the French Revolutionary War, one. It was also a rebellion against slavery, who was led, of course, by Julian Fédon. It was also, as the revolution developed by late 1795, it was also the beginnings of an abortive colonial war of independence. It is very possible that if Fédon's rebellion had lasted for significantly longer, Julian Fédon and his revolutionaries may have rebelled against French rule, and it would have been an event not dissimilar to the Haitian Revolution.
Right.
I also want to say that I have read several people's writings about Fédon's rebellion, and people talk about Grenada would have been another Haiti. That is completely erroneous. Haiti, as the name Haiti, does not exist until 1804, January 1. Fédon's rebellion was put down in 1796. So any talk about Fédon trying to create another Haiti is what people are speaking with in hindsight.
Right.
After Fédon's rebellion was, it was San Domingo or San Doma.
Right.
It was not, when you talk about Haiti, Haiti as a word came into the usage in 1804, 8 years after Fédon's rebellion was put on. So you can't talk anything about no Grenada was another Haiti. No.
Right.
You can say that afterwards.
Right.
No. In the 21st century.
Right.
But not then. It did not exist.
Got you.
Right?
So listen, so we have the Fédon play put on by Heritage as we speak.
Yes.
And I noticed that you were acknowledged
yes,
by Chris.
Chris called me.
Yes.
Chris called me his meeting consultant.
Yes, as a consultant on it.
Sort of. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
In your digging up, as you call it, in your research on the Fédon Revolution, what's one of the most fascinating things that you have come across about Fédon?
Oh, there are so many things. And
Name two.
Two. One is when Fédon's revolutionaries captured a ship belonging to a chap called McBurney, and he took the prisoners, meaning the ships, the crew, which included slaves belonging to McBurney, and Fédon asked them, what are you going to do? Are you going to join us, or are you going to remain prisoners, meaning that they are prisoners of war? And he said, Mr. McBurney's slaves consulted amongst themselves, and he said they want to remain part of this revolution. And Fédon hugged them up and told them that they were as free as he was. And of course, there's the other incident when John Hayes' biography, first time Fédon appears in John Hayes' narrative, is Fédon appears up at Belvedere, coming I think from Grenville, and the French tricolor flag is flying behind his. Fédon's body is framed, or the background of Fédon's person is framed by the French tricolor. And there's a third one which I could
go ahead with the third one.
A third telling incident in that would be when the British, the revolutionaries on Belvedere Estate, had this ceremony where they symbolically burned the British flag, where they put the flame down to a corner, and the flame enveloped and destroyed the entire British flag, which symbolized their rejection of British rule and the acceptance of French suzerainty, French rulership, and so on. The other point I would like to talk about too is 1803, I think it was, where Dent, who was a priest, a Protestant priest in Grenada, but he was acting governor of Grenada, he writes to the colonial secretary telling the colonial secretary that he had just had captured and hanged Joachim Philipp.
The last, yeah.
Right? Well, he's the last known revolutionary. And he said before Joachim Philipp was executed, he told them one, extremely important, that some of Fedon's revolutionaries escaped Grenada after 1796 and went and fought in the Haitian Revolution. It just wasn't called Haiti then, right? But what we call, he fought in Saint-Domingue, and they joined Toussaint Louverture's forces in Saint-Domingue, which many of them had perished. Now, he did not say Fedon went, but he did not say Fedon did not go, right? It is my opinion that Julian Fedon actually fought in the Haitian Revolution after Fedon's rebellion was put down in 1796. That's my belief from other sources, because
go ahead.
Well, there's the Henri Christophe connection, which we could discuss another time.
That's another time. Listen, Curtis, in a nutshell, why did the Fedon rebellion fail?
The Fedon's rebellion failed. There's one seminal reason why Fedon's rebellion failed. They failed to take St. George's. They had the rest of the country, but they never got St. George's. Yes, because they did that for a particular reason.
What was the reason?
Yes, the reason was that the governor had been notified that somebody was, that the French were dissatisfied and they wanted to overthrow the government, but they had no concrete proof. But the Governor General put the militia on alert. And when the militia went on alert, Fedon and his group believed that the government had discovered the plot. So they decided to take a preemptive strike and go on the 3rd of March, 2nd to the 3rd of March. But afterwards, people like Thornhill would say that the government had not discovered the plot. If they had not, if Fedon had decided to take the St. George's, the history of Grenada would have been completely different. Fascinating
analysis and accounts on Julia Fedon. Let's change track a little bit and talk a little bit about S.A. Francis. First of all, what does S.A. in his name stand for? What did the S.A. stand for?
S.A. Simeon Augustine.
Simeon Augustine.
Yeah, Francis. Okay. That's
S.A. Francis.
Yes.
Right. So we're going to look at it from fact and fiction, because, growing up, we hear a lot of things about S.A. Francis, and we don't know for sure what is fact and what is fiction. But let's start with some of the facts about S.A. Francis.
Simeon A. Francis. There is some stuff which is, as I say, borders on fiction, urban legend. S.A. Francis is believed to have been a policeman. And it is said that he beat a policeman within an inch of his life and had to flee to Grenada.
Flee to America?
Not
in America first.
No, he went to Panama first.
Panama first, okay.
Because the Panama Canal was being constructed, and he went there as one of the work crews there. I was told on good authority, he died a few years ago. I was doing research on another Grenadian body, and I came across this. So he said S.A. Francis went to Panama working on the Panama Canal, and there was this system for the workers where you work for 1 week on, you work for a whole week, and then you were off for a few days before you go back to work. And S.A. came back to his lodgings, only to discover that there was this lottery which was being sold, people selling tickets, and there was one ticket left which nobody would purchase. And I was told the number of that ticket was 777, and S.A. Francis bought it. There was the only ticket left, apparently. And he promptly won the lottery, converted the winnings, and went to New York.
Right.
Where he became one of the leaders of what is called today the numbers game. You see it, a lot of people, part of the American underworld, the African-American underworld, in addition to the
General
society, were involved in numbers.
Gambling.
Yes, basically gambling, right? There's one of my favorite movies, is we call it a black exploitation movie. It is called Come Back Charleston Blue, and where Charleston Blue was one of those racketeers and so on. And he became one of the most important and one of the most profitable numbers. I forget the name this is called, but one,
people.
Who were involved in it. S.A. Francis acquired a large personal fortune. They say he used to offer the biggest prizes and used to take the biggest risks. He always paid on time, and he ended up being very prosperous. He bought a sizable fortune in real estate in New York, in particularly Harlem and so on.
And this is in the 30s?
20s. 30s, yeah.
20s,
30s.
Going into 30s, okay.
Yeah. So by 1931, two traditional, everyday American institutions had their sights on S.A. Francis. The first one was the IRS.
He's making too much money.
Right.
Probably tax it.
And the second one was the mafia. And the particular person who was leading that against Francis at the time was a fellow called Dutch Schultz, very famous racketeer who actually gets assassinated in 1935, 3 years after S.A. Francis left.
Departs and comes back to Grenada.
He returns to Grenada. That's how we ended up here. There was the New Amsterdam News, a very famous black African-American newspaper in New York, had this feature on S.A. Francis, where they said that he took all this money and so on. He ended up in Grenada and what he did in Grenada and so on.
So let me ask you about the first myth. Well, growing up, I've always heard that S.A. Francis, when he left the States, put a lot of his money into a piano. And while they were loading the piano onto the boat to Grenada, it looked like one of the cords started to pop, to burst. But somehow, miraculously, the piano, with all the money in it, made it onto the boat, and he came to Grenada with all that money.
I have a variation of that story.
Okay.
The offloading of that piano, a grand piano, took place in Grenada.
That was a Grenada, okay.
And it fell, and when it fell onto the docks or the wharf, some of the money fell out, spilled out when it fell, and they said the customs officer, who probably was British, fainted or something like that.
By the amount of the money?
Yeah, by the amount of money, right? There's also a story that S.A. Francis took, I forget the car name, there's a particular brand name, it's no longer in thing, where he stuffed the car full of money and shipped the car from Canada. Right? Because of course Canada is a British colony just like Grenada and so on. So it would have been easy to do that. And he ended up down Grenada with a lot of money, and it is said in the article in the New Amsterdam News that he lent the government of Grenada $500,000, and I think it's 4% or whatever it was interest that he loaned them at. And not only that, S.A. purchased the building which is now Melville Street corner and Hillsborough Street corner, where I think where now is Cossuless. I think that's where it is now. But it was the only purpose-built building in St. George's at the time which could facilitate Western Union money transfers from one country to the next. And S.A. Francis bought it and rented it back to the Western Union people at an exorbitant price.
What else did he own in Grenada? Because he would have invested his money into, I know you owned the Antillean Hotel.
Yes, that building you see where courts used to be, I think this is a store there, and right opposite Hillsborough Street, on the other side of Hillsborough Street, where T.A. Marishaw's the West Indian was, that whole block that goes right back from Melville Street up to that street, what's the name of that street there? The whole block, that whole block right around that square, it was where he had what's called Everybody's. Oh. Right?
Okay.
Right. So he owned that. He owned, I heard recently that he actually owned the Calivini estate. At
Ranans Valley, Mount Hartman.
Yes. Yeah, he owned lots of places like that. In fact, there's a place down in Lansepine called the S.A. Francis Crescent or Avenue or Circular or something like that.
S.A. Francis Street.
Where, and that is probably in tribute to his being owner of the place.
That whole area.
Yeah, but S.A. Francis was much more important than that. S.A. Francis was one of the founders of Grenada Cooperative Bank Limited in 1932. He and nine other men, including T.A. Marishaw and people like yes, not C.F.P. Renwick, the other one, the one who became the chairman, who died in the late 1970s. Right? Now, C.F.P. Renwick would have been the lawyers, the first lawyers for Grenada Cooperative Bank in 1932. So he was a member of the firm called Renwick and Payne, which was Renwick and Payne, so that'd be A.O. Payne, Albert Oliver Payne, who was the grandfather of Sir Royston Hopkins, right? So you had S.A. Francis owning those things. Now, it is said that he came into the ownership of the Antilles Hotel, Hotel Antilles, which was owned previously by C.F.P. Renwick.
Did he win it in a
Yes, yes. It is believed he lost it he won it in a gambling game. And C.F.P. Renwick gambled every possible thing he owned, and I mean almost every possible thing that he owned. And CFP, S.A. Francis say, I don't want those other things that you have, but I will take your properties, right? And that's how he came to own the Antilles Hotel.
Another myth, it is said that his daughter somehow didn't want to gain any profit from his wealth because maybe the way it was made, and so she never claimed any of his properties and all that. Is that true?
I am not sure that is true. You see, we have these papers here. These papers are in fact indentures and transfers of property from her to other people who were, when she sold. Now, this is only one part. Can you imagine that place there in Grenada, up Lotus Lane? From Lotus Lane to Woolwich Road. That whole area was owned by S.A. Francis. Okay? And she sold a lot of it because there's a lot of indentures and so on where her name actually was on. Hers and the chap who was like a co-executor, who used to own a jeweler shop right on that same Hillsborough Street where the Western Union office was and so on. But I am not so sure if she disavowed herself of, I don't know what she did with the money when she's from the proceeds, but much of what S.A. Francis owned, well, his will, and a friend who actually drove S.A. Francis to the airport. You know, S.A. Francis died
Evelyn Ross.
Yes, Evelyn Ross.
I mean, he was supposed to be with us this morning, but he couldn't make it.
Yes,
because Evelyn Ross knows a lot about S.A. because his dad was S.A. Francis's personal doctor, and he drove, like he just said.
Yes, he said he drove S.A. Francis to the airport
when he was actually leaving the second, he was ill or something and leaving Grenada for medical treatment.
Yes, medical treatment. Went to the United States. Yes, he had cancer of the
that's towards the end.
But he told me that S.A. Francis told me that he knew he wasn't coming back alive. Now, why did he go to the United Kingdom? if he knew he was going to die, is another matter. But
where did he go? United Kingdom?
United Kingdom.
Okay, UK.
So now the daughter, from the documents which I have seen, which is his death certificate and so on, his daughter actually went to England to be with him. Now I suspect his daughter was born in the United States, and she went to England to be with him in his last days. So he died in her company, basically, and he left everything to his everything to.
That was his only daughter, right?
Yes,
his only child.
Yes, his only child.
Did he own that whole area, Grandans Valley area as well?
I am not sure, but he owned. S.A. Francis owned a huge amount
of Grenada.
Yes, of Grenada at the time, and very valuable real estate today. You know? There's one written piece of work which has been published about S.A. Francis. There's only one.
Maurice Patterson?
Yeah, Maurice Patterson's book, So Far So Mad.
And is that part
factional stories?
Factual and part?
Yes. Well, the particular part is horses eat right through the night. That's the particular. There are 4 stories. That first story is about S.A. Francis. But
what is that about? Just briefly.
Maurice was talking about S.A. Francis' involvement in horse racing and so on.
Horse racing, yes.
Yes. And the problem with Maurice's work is that it has a lot of nice, juicy sounding stuff, but there are no references.
But what are some of the things he said about?
And something we have to take what Maurice said with a grain of salt. I'm not saying it is not true.
Could be based on kind of folklore or
yes,
whatever.
But a lot of it.
But let me ask you, what was one of the most interesting things that Maurice said? I don't remember that if reading that book, but he said about S.A. Francis. What do you remember? Anything he said that you didn't know about?
One thing I could remember, I haven't read the book for several years. When Francis saw his workers having lunch, Francis would walk and take what they have, see what they have in their lunch boxes to eat, and he would eat out. He would eat out everything.
His workers.
Yeah, it was a kind of a weird thing for for a human being to do. Perhaps he thought, well, he wouldn't be poisoned.
Grumbed in with them or whatever.
Well, it could be, yes, but S.A. Francis is a really a remarkable character, larger than life. Yeah.
Well, I hope that you will eventually, because I've actually, I'm sure many of us too, but including myself, have encouraged you to do some work on S.A. Francis, and I hope that you are.
Well, I have. I mean, this is since 2018. I was in the registry of the Supreme Court digging up on stuff. So that's how long ago I have become interested in that. So I went and I found all of the conveyances and so on, which are related to S.A. Francis's name.
You think there's a relation between a movie by Ian Fleming and S.A. Francis?
Yes. It is my belief that S.A. Francis provides at least part of the inspiration for the character called Mr. Big in Ian Fleming's novel Live and Let Die. It is my belief. The description, Ian Fleming's description of Mr. Big, and the names are similar, right? Mr. Big, Big Man, and so on. Ian Fleming's description of Mr. Big is not dissimilar to Big Man, S.A. Francis. Yeah. And Ian Fleming did his research in the United States.
In Harlem?
In Harlem, around that same time. It is very possible. And Ian Fleming, of course, worked with the British Secret Service and so on. And he would have an idea. It would not surprise me that S.A. Francis was at least part of the inspiration for Ian Fleming's character.
Very, very interesting.
Mr. Big, yes.
Curtis, I know we can go on and on because you have a wealth of information, but the program unfortunately must come to an end. We have to do a part 2 sometime maybe. But I just want to say thank you for your time and expertise and for sharing with us. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you again next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. for another edition of Interesting Grenadians.
Pharmacare, the pharmacy